Well, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Mama and daughter. At the Clean Company, at the Clean Program team, myself and we have about 18 people working in spreading the word and mostly supporting people through their cleansing and detox program. We always say yes, and especially here because I have a connection through Peter to Manhattan Beach. I've spoken here before, and we just love spreading the word. But what was amazing is that after we said yes, Mama and daughter came to our Clean headquarters with an amazing meal, and we had not only an amazing meal, we had a really fun time chatting with you. So thank you for that. And we're still talking about that lunch at the Clean House. I love bookstores, so I'm really excited to be here. How many of you have read my book? Good. So in my book, I tell the story of how I came to be aware and how I developed the Clean program. But there's a few things I didn't tell you, and I'm going to tell you tonight. And this is what happened. I moved from Uruguay to New York after I finished my medical school. And in Uruguay at the time, the things are different now, but at the time when I finished, throughout my childhood and until I finished my medical school, things were very different than in the United States. We didn't have any big supermarkets. My dad and I and my mom would go to the farmer's market, which was the only way to buy our produce and our food. And they taught me how to choose whatever was ripe and whatever was not. There wasn't big distances of transporting food. Whatever we ate was mostly local. So life was very healthy by default. Then I moved to New York, and not only I was alone without my family and my friends, but I was really busy internship and residency in Manhattan, in one of the busiest hospitals in the world, was crazy. And we ate from the hospital cafeteria, which I don't know if you have any.
We know.
Yeah, in the hospitals they try to cure you on the floors, and then they try to kill you in the cafeteria. And I guess it keeps the business going, right? So then we ate also from nurses' potlucks, and a lot of the nurses there are Filipino, so a lot of Filipino food, and not exactly the healthiest version of it. And then when I had a free time, I used to go to the supermarkets, and I was delighted by the boxes and the jars and the cans and the fact that you could put a box in a microwave oven and you had this elaborate meal in 5 minutes. And I used to think of myself as an Aboriginal in civilization, and I used to remember thinking, wow, these Americans, they really know how to do it. But I started getting sick. And I didn't really understand why, because during my medical school training, we did talk about nutrition, but only in the biochemical sense of dividing the groups into proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, and vitamins and minerals. And that was it. We didn't have any training, any classes on how to translate nutrition into a meal. Right? So I had no idea. So I started getting sick. And I started consulting, obviously, the people that were closest to me, my colleagues. And I was lucky because I was at NYU, and I knew a lot of the doctors there, and I got the best psychiatrist because I was suffering from mood problems that were diagnosed as depression, and I got the best allergies because I was sneezing all day long, and I chose the best gastroenterologist because I had nightmares digesting, and between the three of them I got 3 diagnoses: irritable bowel syndrome, severe allergies, and severe depression, and I was put on 7 prescription medications. And that didn't really make sense to me in a couple of ways. One of them was getting these prescription medications in order to be able to function, but the other thing that shocked me was that I was actually practicing that same medicine. Because when you give the prescription, it's different than when you get them. right? So I was only giving them before. And then I realized this doesn't make sense. So living in New York, one of the most amazing things that I was able to do was actually go to the bookstores, and there's Barnes and Noble has one in is it Washington Square? Not Times Square.
Columbus.
14th Street.
Yes, Union.
Union Square. I used to go to Barnes and Noble, which is like 5 stories, and you don't have to buy any books. You just get books, sit down, and buy coffee, which I didn't know that I was going to quit at that time. Anyways, I never drank coffee once, but I used to study there, and I used to read any book that had anything to do with the symptoms that I was suffering from. And one of the symptoms that I was suffering from that was the most alarming to me was my depression, or what was called my depression. It was this waking up with a sense of doom and sadness and really actually not wanting to live, you know. And I was scared of even going out and into the world and doing my work. So bookstores, in a way, changed my life. And I never even thought I was going to write a book. But this is what happened. I discovered meditation through the bookstore. Actually, the book literally fell in my hands. I ended up traveling to an ashram in India. I lived in this monastery or school of yoga in India, and I studied meditation and yoga, and I was exposed to other doctors from many different modalities like Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, chiropractors, and we would actually discuss the patients amongst all of us and decide what was the best course of action for each individual or the best combination of approaches, right? So this was truly integrative medicine. I've never heard of it. When I went to India, it was 2000. It was 1998, and the word integrative medicine was not as fashionable as it is now. So I had never heard of it. But this was the true practice of integrative medicine. Then I came back to the United States, and I had this idea that I was going to do the same thing, and I was going to find all these other practitioners and create a circle and a network. And I moved to Palm Springs to a really busy and profitable cardiology practice with admission privileges in 4 hospitals. So I spent from 5 o'clock in the morning to 1 o'clock in the afternoon just rounding in the hospitals, intensive care units and floors. And then at 2 I got into the offices and saw patients. And basically what my job translated was to see people for 7 minutes a visit and just write down a bunch of prescription again. So even though I knew that this was not the kind of medicine I wanted to practice, I was forced, because of the fact that I had to become profitable for the practice, to be able to end up practicing this kind of supermarket medicine. So and I hated it. So at one point I just quit. And I quit when one day basically a friend of mine came to visit, and I tell the story in the book. He came to visit me in Palm Springs, and I opened the door and I saw his transformation was so profound. I had seen him 10 days before. He was a movie producer from Los Angeles, was always bloated and really unhealthy, gray looking, nervous, never present. And when I saw him, I saw this new shiny being who had lost like 15 pounds in 10 days and looked incredible. There was a glow about him. The whites of his eyes were so white that it kind of shocked me. I said, well, what happened to you? Well, did you get plastic surgery? And he said, no, I just went to a fasting retreat, which is 5 minutes away from here. It's called the We Care Spa. And I spent 7 days there, and this is what happened. And I said, no way. And he said, yeah, let's go. Come. There's a lot of people there, you can talk to them. So I went with him, and I started talking to the people there, and everybody was glowing. It was like a light bulbs. And the longer they had been there, the more they were glowing. And I started talking to everybody, and I'm very curious, so I started asking them, well, why are you here? And I had multiple sclerosis 5 years ago. And I've been coming here, and I've been free of symptoms. And why are you here? And I had this autoimmune disease, and and I've been free of sin. And I was just blown away, skeptical, but you know, you cannot argue with what people are telling you, even though it's not in the medical journals. So I became really curious. I started going there. I did the program myself, and all my symptoms, depression, irritable bowel syndrome, and allergies, completely disappeared. Not only that, I lost 15 pounds myself in like 10 days, and I looked and felt 10 years younger. To the point that wherever I was walking, in the hospital or outside the hospital, everybody approached me, wow, what happened to you? And people were coming and asking me, you know, I want to do the same that you did. So first my friends and my family, and then my patients. And I had a little 2-bedroom house in the desert in Palm Springs, and suddenly it started, you know, people started coming in, and a friend of a friend, hey, I heard that you're doing this, and my house had a 6-month waiting list for my second bedroom. It was crazy. People would come and I would just experiment on them. And I would do juices, and I would do this and that, and I would send them to a colonic therapist, either to We Care or around the area. And I started seeing that not only people started glowing and losing weight, but also I started affecting diseases without medications and able to take people off medications that they were on. I was just blown away by the range of problems that were resolved with this approach. And at that time, I didn't know nothing. I just put people in juices, whatever it was. And it was still working incredibly well. So I started reading again, going to bookstores and buying books on everything that I could find my hands on. Colonic hydrotherapy, nutrition, cleansing, detoxification. I read books by Richard Anderson, by Arnold Ehret, by Richard Schultz from Venice. Well, I mean, everything that my hands got a hold of, I read, and I started understanding. But it wasn't until I found the Institute for Functional Medicine, created by Jeffrey Bland. Anybody familiar with it? Functional medicine, yeah. So basically, functional medicine translates the Eastern understanding of health into a Western model of medicine with medical terminology. So it made so much more sense than the approach that regular doctors have in the United States. And it wasn't until I found functional medicine that I truly understood the biochemistry, the physiology of cleansing and detoxification, how to support the liver during it, how to intensify the detoxification mode that the body can go into, and all the different aspects of cleansing and detoxification. And of course, if I was putting people on cleansing programs before I knew anything, after I started really learning, it was just crazy. And people were actually flying, because if somebody did the program, then the whole family wanted to do the program. So people were flying from all over the world, and I was working, and I had quit my job at the hospital, and I moved to LA, and I started working in West LA in a little practice with a Chinese medicine doctor and a chiropractor, and there was literally a line waiting, and a waiting list to see me, because everybody that did the program, what was the program at that time, because it has evolved, were getting such incredible results. And then a friend of mine invited me to go speak in New York, and I went to give a talk in New York, and somebody in New York, a really good alternative medicine doctor, asked me to move to New York for a time and to work with him. And I couldn't refuse that invitation. So I went there, and all these long stories, I wanted to tell you how I came to write the book, because I never even thought of writing a book. I consider myself a reader. And I was at my office, at this alternative medicine doctor's office, seeing patients, and I was about to finish my day, and I got a call from another patient of mine who became my mentor, and he said, I need you to come immediately. I'm 3 blocks away in a meeting. gave me the address. I finished seeing my last patient. I went there, and when I opened up, it was a big office. There was a huge table. There were like 15 people around the table. He was one of them. He stood up, came to the door, hugged me, and said, "You're gonna pitch your book." Turned around and went back to the table, and he said, "Come," and he introduced me to the elite in HarperCollins. The best editors and all the people from HarperCollins were sitting there. They actually wanted to. This mentor of mine is Donna Karan's best friend, and he kind of filters projects for her, and they wanted a book by her. And he said, "Well, listen, Donna is very busy, but I want to introduce you to my daughter who's writing a book." So then he called me, and when I approached, introduced me to everybody, he said, "Alex, why don't you tell him about the book that you're writing?" And I was like, "What?" And I remember my father used to tell me, because in medical school in Uruguay, the exams are oral. So he always used to tell me, he took me to